Picture this. You're at a party. Someone walks over, smiles, and asks, "So, how are you doing?"
Classic opener.
You say, "I'm fine, thank you." And then, nothing. Complete silence. You're both just standing there waiting for the other person to rescue the moment.
The slow death.
The slow, uncomfortable, slightly humiliating death. You're thinking in your own language, translating, rejecting the translation, searching for a different word. And by the time you've assembled a sentence,
They've already walked away to grab a drink.
gone. They've had 3 more conversations, and you're still standing there holding your unspoken thought. Every single person learning a language has been in that moment. And today, we're going to fix it. Not patch it, not slightly improve it. Fix it.
Because here's what most people don't realize. Running out of things to say in English has almost nothing to do with vocabulary.
Say that again.
Running out of things to say has almost nothing to do with your vocabulary.
You used to hold your turn, and it handed your turn away.
Worse than silence. So what do we use instead?
Thinking phrases. And the difference isn't just linguistic, it's psychological. A thinking phrase signals, I am taking this seriously enough to consider it carefully. Same pause, completely different impression. One makes you look lost, the other makes you look thoughtful.
To be perfectly honest, use this before a genuine opinion, especially a slightly unexpected one. It signals authenticity.
That's a fascinating question. Let me think about that for a second. This buys you 3 to 5 full seconds of thinking time while simultaneously making the other person feel heard.
How can I put this? Signals that what you're about to say is nuanced, that it resists easy summary. The listener leans in before you've said a word.
It's interesting you say that because a bridge and a thinking phrase at the same time. You're buying time and connecting to what they said.
I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately. Implies this topic lives in you outside of this conversation. Makes your next sentence feel significant before you've said it.
The way I see it, clean, confident, positions what follows as your interpretation, which gives you the freedom to be subjective and bold.
And this is the part that gets really interesting. Build suspense inside your own sentence. Nobody interrupts a sentence that promises something good is coming.
Bear with me here. Use this when your next connection might seem like a stretch. It's charming. It invites the listener into your thinking process.
There's something about this I can't quite articulate, but the most sophisticated one on the list. Acknowledging the limits of language is itself a kind of intelligence. And the moment you say you can't articulate something, you usually find a way to say it beautifully.
Because the pressure is off.
Because the pressure is off. And finally, what I mean is, or what I'm really trying to say is, the recalibration phrase. You've started a sentence in one direction and realize there's a better version. Instead of abandoning it, you redirect cleanly.
Used thoughtfully, any 3 of these will transform how you hold space in a conversation. The goal is simply to have them ready. So when the pause arrives, you reach for one of these instead of One substitution, enormous difference. Closing. Here's what we want you to practice. Take any simple sentence. I like music. I live in an apartment. I work in an office. And write down 4 expansions. Who, where, why, how. Don't worry about grammar. Just build the pyramid and see how far it takes you.
Then, in one real conversation, every few sentences, use a bridge. Move to a new topic. Don't plan where you're going. Let the phrase take you. Trust it. Let the destination surprise you.
And when the pause comes, and it will come, reach for a thinking phrase instead of That's all.
Before we go, we want to see something slowly because we mean it. Learning a language as an adult is one of the most vulnerable things a person can do. It asks you to sound uncertain when you're not uncertain. It asks you to stumble in public. It asks you to reach for a word and come back empty in front of other people and try again anyway. That takes a particular kind of courage that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but is enormous on the inside. If you've been showing up to English, even imperfectly, even hesitantly, you're already braver than you're giving yourself credit for.
The 3 tools we've shared today are real. They work. Not because they're magic, but because they're honest about what conversation actually is. It's not a performance. It's not proof of intelligence. It's just thinking out loud, together. The pyramid gives you depth. The bridge gives you range. The thinking phrases give you time. And time in a conversation is everything. Go have one, a real one, a long one. Let it go somewhere you didn't expect. Let it surprise you. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next one.
Which is surprising, because when most of us start learning a language, the first thing we do is open a vocabulary app. More words, more words. If I just collect enough words, I'll never go silent again.
And what actually happens?
You end up with a large mental word list and still run out of things to say after 30 seconds. Because fluency isn't a storage problem. It's an architecture problem. It's about how you build and connect your thoughts.
Okay, architecture. Walk me through that.
Think about 2 houses built from identical materials. Same bricks, same quantity. One house is beautiful, open, livable. The other is just a pile of bricks on the ground. The difference isn't the materials, it's the structure. Language works the same way. You might already have plenty of words, but without knowing how to expand a thought, connect it to the next one, layer in detail, you say one sentence and hit a wall. What we're teaching today is the blueprint.
We're calling it the 3-step formula for thought architecture. All 3 steps in one conversation. Let's go. The pyramid method. What is it? Imagine a pyramid. At the very top, the tip, is a single simple sentence. The most basic thing you can say about any topic. I like coffee. That's level 1.
And most learners stop there.
Exactly. They say, I like coffee, and wait for the other person to carry things forward, which puts all the pressure on the listener and feels less like a conversation and more like an interrogation. The pyramid method says, don't stop at the tip. Expand downward. And the way you expand is by asking yourself 4 questions.
4 questions.
Who, where, why, how. Every single sentence in English can be opened up using those 4 questions. Who's involved? Where does this happen? Why do you feel this way? How does it look or work or happen?
So if I say, I like coffee, and work through those 4 questions,
You suddenly have a paragraph, a whole world to talk about.
let me try it right now. I like coffee. Why? Because I need it to start my morning. Without it, I'm basically a slow-moving problem. Where? There's a small cafe near my apartment with tiny round tables and a very particular kind of morning light. How? I drink it black, no sugar, which my friends consider a personality flaw. And who? Sometimes I go with my neighbor Maria, who takes 40 minutes to decide what she wants, which honestly defeats the purpose of a quick morning coffee.
5 seconds ago, you had 3 words. Now you have a story, detail, humor, personality, all built from I like coffee.
It's almost embarrassing how simple it is.
The best techniques always are. Because in a real conversation, you don't have time for a complicated mental process. The pyramid method, once practiced, becomes automatic.
2 live demonstrations. 2 real scenarios where this completely changes the conversation.
Scenario 1.
Tell me about yourself.
The question that has derailed more interviews than
any wrong answer ever has. People hear it and go completely blank.
Level 1 answer. The tip. I work in marketing. I've been doing it for about 5 years.
Fine. Acceptable. Forgettable. Now let's build the pyramid. Why are you in marketing?
I ended up in marketing almost by accident. I studied psychology, and at some point, I realized that understanding why people make decisions is the same skill whether you're in a therapy room or writing a campaign.
Now the other person is paying attention. Where have you worked?
Mostly at smaller tech companies, places where you're responsible for everything from social media to event planning to writing the company newsletter at midnight.
Relatable. How do you approach your work?
I tend to start every project with one question. What does this person actually need? Not what they say they need, but what's underneath that. It slows things down at the start, but saves a lot of confusion later.
And who? Who do you enjoy working with?
The best teams I've been on are the ones where people disagree openly and nobody takes it personally. That's genuinely rare. But when you find it, the work is completely different.
That's not an interview answer. That's a conversation. And notice, nothing there was scripted. The pyramid builds itself in real time.
Scenario 2. Hobbies. What do you do for fun? I like running. Full stop.
And then both of you stare at your shoes.
Let's expand it. Level 1. I like running. Why?
Honestly, I started running after a really difficult stretch in my life. I needed something that was entirely mine. No emails, no notifications, just me and the pavement.
Where?
Early mornings, before the city wakes up. There's something a little strange about moving through streets that are completely empty. It feels like the whole place belongs to you for an hour.
How?
Slowly. People always look surprised when I say that. They imagine runners are these intense athletic types. I'm the one at the back of the race, waving at the crowd.
Who?
Mostly alone, but occasionally my sister joins me, and then we spend the whole time talking, forget to run, and end up walking and eating pastries, which somewhat defeats the purpose.
I like running just became a personality, a person. The listener isn't thinking about your grammar anymore. They're interested in you.
And that's the real function of language. Not to demonstrate vocabulary or prove you studied. To connect.
So last week I was at a dinner, new people, and I was doing everything right. I remembered the pyramid method. Someone asked what I'd been working on, and I built the pyramid perfectly. Who, where, why, how. And then I finished. I looked at them. They looked at me. The topic was completely closed, and neither of us knew how to move to something new without it feeling like we were starting an entirely different conversation from scratch.
The dead end. Which is different from the freeze we just talked about. The freeze happens when you run out of words. The dead end happens when you run out of road.
And it has a specific solution. We call it the bridge.
Here's something nobody really teaches about natural English conversation. If you watch one, the topics almost never stay in one place for long.
They jump constantly. Someone mentions a restaurant, then they're on a holiday from 2 years ago, then their grandmother's cooking, then a film they saw last month, and none of those jumps feel jarring.
Because they're not changing the subject, they're extending it. There's an invisible thread connecting each topic to the next. That thread is the bridge. It's a phrase, sometimes just 5 or 6 words, that signals, I'm not abandoning what we were talking about. I'm taking us somewhere new, and you're invited.
And these are not textbook transition words. These are the actual phrases native speakers use in real time, without thinking.
Which means they should feel almost too casual. If they feel slightly informal, that's correct. Here we go.
Speaking of which, the most natural bridge in the language.
Use it when something in the current topic sounds like something in the next one, even if the connection is loose.
That actually reminds me of slightly more personal. You're signaling that something the other person said has triggered a memory or story. It's a compliment disguised as a pivot.
On a completely different note, this one is honest about the jump. You're not pretending there's a logical connection. The transparency itself is what makes it work.
Which is funny because sets up a contrast or an irony. The listener is already leaning in before you've said anything.
And that's actually connected to something I've been thinking about. Positions you as someone with a rich inner life, makes the conversation feel layered without being academic.
You know what that makes me think of? A question bridge. You're pulling the other person into the movement actively.
Funnily enough, or oddly enough, these signal that something surprising or counterintuitive is coming.
It's a bit like the analogy bridge. You're about to compare the current topic to something in a completely different domain.
The last time the story bridge. You're drawing a personal memory into the conversation. Stories activate the brain differently than opinions or facts.
And I don't know if this is related, but the humble bridge. Sounds uncertain, but it's actually a confident move. You're flagging that your next thought might be a stretch, which makes the other person generous. They'll meet you halfway.
You don't need all 10. If you get comfortable with 3. Speaking of which, that actually reminds me of, and which is funny because you can bridge almost any conversation, anywhere.
Connect 2 unrelated topics using at least 3 bridges. Live, no preparation.
What are the topics?
The weather and space exploration.
Those have nothing to do with each other.
Every topic has everything to do with every other topic. That's the whole point.
The weather this week has been genuinely odd. I stepped outside yesterday and it was warm, and then within an hour, gray skies, that particular cold that gets into your coat no matter how thick it is. Speaking of which, I read that weather prediction technology has become extraordinarily sophisticated. Supercomputers modeling millions of atmospheric variables simultaneously just to tell you whether to bring an umbrella on Thursday. Which is funny because the same mathematical frameworks used to model weather patterns on Earth are essentially how scientists study the atmospheres of other planets. Mars has weather, dust storms, temperature swings, seasons. And that actually reminds me of something I read about the Perseverance rover. It carries a small weather station on board, measuring wind speed, temperature, atmospheric pressure on another planet.
You just got from Tuesday's drizzle to a rover on Mars.
Using 3 bridges.
Did you catch them? Speaking of which, moved us from general weather to weather technology. Which is funny because moved us from Earth's weather models to planetary atmospheres. That actually reminds me of moved us from planetary science to the Perseverance rover specifically. 3 bridges. The conversation never paused. So why do fluent speakers never seem to run out of things to say? Is it vocabulary, confidence?
It's a deeply ingrained habit of association. Without knowing they're doing it, fluent speakers are constantly scanning what they hear for connections to something else they know or have experienced. When someone says, "the weather's been strange," a fluent speaker's already thinking of a storm from last autumn, which connects to a trip they took, which connects to a person they met, all in half a second.
So the freeze isn't really a language problem.
It's a processing load problem. When you're operating in a second language, so much mental energy goes toward vocabulary and grammar that very little is left for that associative scanning.
You're spending all your RAM on the language itself. Nothing left to run the bridging software.
Exactly. And that's where thinking phrases come in. They're not just filler. They're a way to hold your place in a conversation while your brain catches up.
Because the pause itself is not the problem. Every human being pauses. Thinking takes a moment. That's biology, not failure. The problem is what fills the pause.
When fills the pause, listeners disengage. The rhythm breaks. And here's the irony. Doesn't actually buy you more time. Research suggests listeners interpret filler sounds as signals that the speaker is finished,
which means people are more likely to jump in and take over.